All right, level two. So what we have here is a lesson on sequence of tenses. Okay, it's probably the most complex lesson that you'll learn. It's actually a lot easier once you get into it, but to be perfectly honest, it took me teaching it for 10 years before I really truly understood it. So if you don't get it at first blush, just take really good notes and just use them as a cheat sheet as you go. And as you go, you'll start to see that it makes sense. The trick here is that sequence of tenses really kind of connotes an idea of tone grammatically, which is kind of cool that we actually can understand the tone with which someone wrote from 2,000 years ago. Whereas nowadays, if we're reading satire, a lot of people don't get that it's satire. They think that it's real, you know? So this is one of those things where the grammar actually lets you know what's going on. So to understand it, here we have the sequence of tenses, okay? So think of a sequence of tenses as a natural rhythm versus what did I write? Versus breaking it. It's all backwards for me. So when the rhythm fits, it's expected. And when it doesn't fit, then you notice it more and you remember it more. Kind of like my using blue on this slide. To give you a good example, let me do this for you. Okay, so da 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 da. Like you're like, whoa, what is that? How did he go from happy birthday to you into something totally different that clearly was ska? Whereas, you know, okay, you would, you know, I guarantee you mentally you went but if I went you'd be like really confused. Or my favorite example is Mary Had a Little Lamb. So, you know, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. Versus Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. Like you're like, wait, those are the same words, but a totally different tone. Exactly. And that's what we call a broken sequence. So there's regular sequence where it fits the sequence of tenses, and there's broken sequence. And I hope that that helped highlight the difference. The best way to do it is to give you a chart, because I'm a fan of charts. So if you take a look at page 260, you've got a chart. I've also color-coded that chart for you. So a sequence of tenses is made up of two clauses, a main clause in the indicative and a subordinate clause, which is in the subjunctive. In a primary sequence, and they're called primary sequences, in a primary sequence, if your main clause has the present, the future, or the future perfect in it, then you can expect the subjunctive to exist in the present or the perfect. Anything else would be weird. That's the tone that you would expect. Da 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 da. Okay? In a secondary sequence, if your secondary sequence main clause is imperfect, perfect, or pluperfect, you should expect the imperfect or the pluperfect in the subordinate clause. Same thing. So primary and secondary, this is what you should expect in each. You'll notice that primary clauses don't deal in the past, and secondary clauses only deal in the past in the main clause. So both of these, though, are representative of ba ba da ba 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 ba. And again, page 260. Now, what I want you to see here is the primary and secondary sequences in rhythm, okay? So the way that you would translate it as, it would be with the tone of, well, as you would expect, right? So, mater tua ad tabernum ibit, tam celeriter ne eam e domo egreri senseris, okay? So your mother will go to the shop so quickly that you wouldn't even notice that she had left home, as one would expect. And the reason that it's as one would expect is because we used the matching sequence. This is the primary sequence where it fits the rhythm. At the bottom, I use the secondary sequence where it fits the rhythm. Okay, mater tua in sepulchro mansit, ut mortuam esse putares. Okay, so that's secondary sequence, and I stayed within the sequence. Your mother stayed so long, stayed in the tomb so long that you were thinking that she was dead, as one would expect. Okay, so that is primary and secondary sequence both being used as one would expect. That is following the sequence. So there's nothing that remarkable. You would translate it and just kind of leave it because, yeah, well, of course, that's what you'd expect. But you may have heard a slight tone change there. But also, when you do primary, secondary sequence, but you do a broken sequence, and that's what, it's a harmony word, it's a broken sequence. So, mater tua ibit ad tabernum, tam caleriter, ne eam e domo agredi sensiset. Sensiset is pluperfect, but ibit is future. So we went primary sequence, and then we broke it. Your mother will go to the shop so quickly that you wouldn't notice that she'd left from the house. Like you normally would notice when your mom would leave from the house. So that you wouldn't notice is actually surprising. And that's surprise. The fact that it goes against the natural order of things. Bup, ba, da, bup, 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 bup. You're like, wait, what? Why did that work? Okay? That's highlighting that you wouldn't expect it. So this is what we call a broken sequence. And then the next one. Mater tua in sepulchro mansit ut mortuam esse puta veris. Okay? Your mother stayed so long in the tomb that you thought she was dead. No one would think that their mom would go into a tomb and die. That doesn't make any sense. So you actually thought that she was dead. So what you could do when you see a broken sequence is put in parentheses the word actually, because you actually thought she was dead. No one expected that. It's the Spanish Inquisition. So when you use a broken sequence, and that's what you're seeing here is a broken sequence, then it goes against what you expect, and it goes against the natural order of how you expect it to happen. And that's why we highlight that with a broken sequence. It's actually happened that way. You wouldn't expect it to happen that way, but it happened that way. And that's what sequence of tense does. So I want you to go back to exercise 50C and 50D and highlight, not literally, but right next to it, or put in different color ink so that I can see it, what sequence of tense they're using. And if it's primary, secondary, just leave it as it is. But if it's a broken sequence, you need to label that it's broken and change the translation to say actually, in parentheses though, okay? So again, 50C and 50D, you've already done them. Tell me what sequence of tense we're using. There's a chart on page 260, and I just gave you color coding. And if it's a broken sequence, use the word actually. You don't have to do anything if it's as expected, because it's as expected. All right, complicated in some ways, but after you've used it enough times, you just kind of get used to it. It's kind of like learning sarcastic voice, you know, like, oh no, I really want to hear what you have to say, versus, oh no, I really want to hear what you have to say. Like, it really changes the tone, but that's tone of voice. We have no grammatical way of doing that. In Latin, they absolutely did. All right, I'm going to hit the button now.